The sails light hummed above me, warm and flattering, while I smoothed a camel coat over my shoulders and heard a laugh I knew better than my own breath. A man's voice, easy and pleased, bled through the thin curtain to my right. Then, clear as frost on glass, "She signed it. She'll never know." The sentence didn't shout. It didn't need to. It slid into me the way a needle slides into cloth, quiet and final. I didn't move. The hook on my stall held my old sweater and my handbag. The mirror held my face, older than I felt an hour ago. The boutique smelled faintly of steamed wool and sweet perfume someone had tested at the counter. Hangers clicked somewhere. A child laughed near the cash wrap and then was shushed. On the other side of the curtain, the voice, his voice, went on, softer, like he was speaking into a hairline crack he'd put in my life. "Under her name," he said, and a low, admiring giggle answered him. My mouth tasted like a penny. I slid onto the padded stool, careful, as if sudden movement might startle the truth back into silence. The lining of the new coat whispered against my blouse. I watched my hands. They were steady from a lifetime of careful work, and also not steady at all. I opened my bag, found my phone by touch alone. The black screen looked up at me like a pond at night. I pressed the red circle. The seconds began to climb. Quiet steps up a staircase I had not meant to build. "Relax," he murmured, the way he used to soothe me at the dentist. "She doesn't read forms." A rustle, a smile in the words. I could hear it. The curtain edge brushed my knuckle when I stood. The store's music, something with strings, swelled, folded back into itself. I saw the coat in the mirror, how well it fit, how wrong it suddenly was. Through the weave of fabric and air, a woman's perfume drifted brighter, closer. I drew one breath, then another, and placed my thumb over stop. I was no longer choosing a coat. I was choosing whether to open the curtain. I sat back down on the small bench, the air around me suddenly thick with perfume and betrayal. My fingers trembled over the phone, the glowing red circle waiting for my courage. I could hear him still, Aaron. His tone casual, amused. The same tone he'd used when reading recipes aloud, or teasing me about burning toast. "It's all under her name," he said again, low and confident. The bank didn't even blink. The woman beside him laughed, the sound light practiced. My thumb pressed the circle. The screen blinked once. Recording. I held the phone in my lap, screen down, heartbeat loud enough to compete with the boutique's soft music. The seconds began to climb in the corner of the display, one after another, proof building quietly in real time. 40,000. Aaron continued. "She won't see it. I manage everything." His voice was steady, too steady. The voice of a man convinced he'd mastered his wife. I remembered the nights he'd stayed late, balancing the accounts, the envelopes I'd signed without reading because trust had always seemed like love's proof. Now, each signature I'd given him felt like a small betrayal of myself. I could see my reflection in the mirror, pale, motionless, the new coat half-buttoned. A woman who had loved completely, now sitting in a box of light, learning what that love had cost. The seconds on the screen passed 60, then 90. The woman's voice drifted closer, a whisper that barely shaped words. Then his laughter, quiet, arrogant, cut her off. "She trusts me. Always has." The recording caught everything. Tone, rhythm, laughter, the soft scrape of fabric. Every sound proof that my life had cracked without making a noise. When the silence finally came, I touched stop. The timer froze at 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Proof. Small enough to fit in my palm, strong enough to destroy the life it documented. I stared at the dark screen and whispered, to no one, "You've given me everything I need." The curtain swayed as I pulled it aside. Light poured in, white, clinical, unforgiving. The boutique suddenly felt smaller, the air sharper, the sound of music thinner. I stepped out slowly, as though crossing an invisible border between two versions of myself. The one who didn't know, and the one who could never go back. Aaron stood 3 feet away, a gray coat draped over one arm. His face, the same one I'd kissed good morning for nearly 10 years, froze mid-smile. Beside him, a woman turned from the mirror. Young, smooth hair the color of syrup, a silk blouse that shimmered when she moved. She clutched a handbag with nervous fingers. He blinked first. "Clara?" My name left his mouth as a question, not a recognition. I said nothing. Silence felt safer than sound. I lifted the phone from my side, the black screen still lit, the tiny waveform pulsing red. His eyes flicked down, and I saw the blood drain from his face, as if the device itself had whispered his sins aloud. The woman looked between us, confused at first, then afraid. She stepped back. The sales associate's voice floated faintly from across the room, asking if anyone needed another size. No one answered. I watched Aaron's throat move, the way it always did before a lie. "This isn't what you think," he started, voice brittle, reaching for that old authority that once steadied me. "It never is," I replied. The words came out low, even, like they'd been waiting their whole lives for air. For a moment, no one moved. A strand of his companion's perfume hung in the air, jasmine and something synthetic, expensive. I remembered once wearing the same note, before I learned it clings too long. I turned the phone so the timer faced him. 2:14, saved. The proof glowed faintly against the fluorescent light. "You should go," I said to the woman, and she did without a word. Aaron took one step forward. I took one back. Between us the light hummed, steady and cold. I felt nothing but calm, a quiet sharper than any scream. Rain tapped against the windshield like cautious fingers, steady, relentless. The city blurred beyond the glass, streaks of yellow and red smeared by motion and water. I drove slowly, both hands gripping the steering wheel, my pulse matching the rhythm of the wipers. In the passenger seat, my handbag sat open, the phone screen dark but alive with what it held. His voice still echoed in my head. Warm, familiar, and now weaponized. She signed it. "She'll never know." I could still hear the small laugh after those words, the careless ease that had once sounded like charm. The heater blew faintly, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and the faint trace of my perfume, one I suddenly couldn't stand. Every turn of the wheel felt heavier. I stopped at a red light and looked at my reflection in the side window. Pale, hollow-eyed, framed by rain trails. A stranger wearing my face. When the light changed, I didn't move. Cars behind me honked, muffled through the downpour. I pressed my hand to my chest. The sound of my heartbeat filled the quiet car, loud and uneven. I wasn't crying. Not yet. The tears hovered somewhere deep, locked behind the shock. The recording was still in the phone, safely tucked into its digital veins. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of my husband's truth. Proof. My lifeline and my weapon. I thought of the years we'd shared dinners, bills, the same bed. The same soft routines. Each memory now sounded different when overlaid with his laughter. When I finally turned onto our street, the storm had grown heavier. Water streamed along the curbs, reflecting every passing headlight. I parked in front of the house and didn't step out right away. The engine hummed, steady, waiting. Silence sat beside me, patient and suffocating. For the first time, I understood how loud betrayal could be, even when no one was speaking at all. The house felt foreign when I stepped inside, as though someone had rearranged the air itself. The lights were too bright, the rooms too clean, every surface humming with quiet deceit. I hung my damp coat by the door and stood there a long moment, listening to the radiator hiss. The clock on the wall ticked like a slow accusation. I walked to the desk in Aaron's study, a place I'd always respected as his. Bills, contracts, receipts. I used to tease him for keeping everything filed so neatly. "You're the organized one," I'd say, half proud, half relieved that someone handled the details I never had patience for. But now, I saw the order for what it was. Control disguised as competence. The drawer slid open with a soft sigh. Inside, pens, clipped envelopes, paper that smelled faintly of ink and secrecy. Beneath a notebook, I found a white envelope unmarked. My fingers hesitated, then tore it open. The papers inside trembled with me. A loan agreement. My name printed neatly at the top. Clara Wynne. The date, 3 days ago. Amount, $48,000. I traced the signature at the bottom, familiar but not mine. The curve of the C was too high, the tail of the Y too long. I could almost feel the pressure of his hand, pressing too hard to mimic my light touch. The room tilted slightly. I sat down on the edge of his chair, the leather cold through my skirt. My knees wouldn't hold me. All those evenings he'd told me, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," came back like echoes through fog. He hadn't been protecting me. He'd been burying me in trust. A gust of wind rattled the window, making the papers flutter. I stared at my name beside the forged signature. A perfect pairing of truth and lie. The recording had been one wound. This was the knife still lodged inside it. Betrayal rarely travels alone, I thought. It brings company, deceit, cowardice, and silence dressed as love. The papers lay across the desk like small, obedient corpses, flat, official, impossible to argue with. I stared at my name printed in neat black letters, at the false signature curled beside it, and reached for my phone. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. Still, I found the number at the top of the page, customer service, 24/7 assistance. The line rang 4 times before a woman answered, her voice brisk but kind. "Good evening, this is Leora with Greenleaf Bank. How can I assist you tonight?" I swallowed. Yes, I need to check on a loan that may have been taken out in my name, without my knowledge. A brief pause. Then the soft clatter of keys. "Of course, ma'am. May I have your full name and date of birth?" I gave her the details. My voice sounded calm, even polite. But beneath it, my pulse slammed against my ribs. A steady percussion of disbelief. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear faint music behind her. The hum of an office night shift. Then, "Yes, Mrs. Wynne, there is indeed a personal loan under your name. $48,000, issued 3 days ago, 3 days," the words echoed. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Can you tell me who signed the documents?" "There's a digital copy on file," she said carefully. "It appears to be your signature." I let out a small laugh, thin, cracked, but still a laugh. "It's not," the clerk's voice softened. "Then you'll need to come in tomorrow with ID. You can file a fraud report. We'll compare handwriting samples." "All right." I wrote down her instructions with shaking fingers. "Thank you, Leora. Of course, I'm sorry this happened." When the call ended, I sat in the quiet room, the dial tone still echoing somewhere deep inside me. My voice had not broken. My dignity had survived the sentence. But my heart was a fist of noise pressing against the silence. I moved through the bedroom like a ghost rehearsing her own departure. The bedside lamp cast a low pool of light over the open suitcase. I didn't need much. Jeans, a sweater, my toothbrush, the documents I'd gathered from his desk. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, marking each second of the life I was packing away. The recording was saved twice, once on my phone, once backed up to the cloud. The loan papers were folded neatly into a folder inside my bag, proof and motive side by side. Outside, rain had stopped, leaving the street lamps haloed in mist. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the sound of water still dripping from the eaves, ordinary noises from an unordinary night. Then came the metallic sound I'd been dreading, the rattle of his key in the front door. My hand stilled on the zipper. For a moment, I thought about pretending to be asleep, waiting until morning to leave. But cowardice had already cost me too much. He entered quietly, as if sensing the difference in the air. I turned as he stepped into the doorway. His coat was damp, his expression uncertain, defensive. "Clara?" he said softly, testing the sound of my name. My bag was half-zipped on the bed between us. His eyes flicked to it, then back to me. "I know," I said simply. His mouth opened, but no words came. The faint smell of another woman's perfume lingered on his sleeve. "I'm leaving tonight," I continued. "Don't follow me. Don't call. Tomorrow you'll receive a call. From the bank first, then the police." He took a step forward, but I was already closing the bag, the zipper smooth and final. I lifted it by the handle and brushed past him toward the door. Some exits, I realized, aren't escapes. They're beginnings. May opened the door before I could knock twice. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her face bare, still soft with sleep. The clock in her kitchen glowed 11:47 p.m. She didn't ask questions, just stepped aside, letting me in from the damp night air. The smell of chamomile tea and laundry detergent wrapped around me like something steady, something known. "Clara," she said quietly once the door shut. "Tell me." For a long moment I couldn't. The words sat in my throat like stones. Then they came. Slow at first, then rushing. The boutique, the whisper through the curtain, the recording, the loan, his voice saying, "She won't know." May didn't interrupt. She poured tea, set a cup before me, and listened. Her eyes darkened, not with shock, but with the calm fury of someone who had suspected all along that something was wrong. When I finished, the kettle had gone cold. My tea sat untouched. May reached across the table and took my hand. "You're staying here," she said simply. "Tomorrow morning we go to the bank, then the police. You're not facing this alone." Her certainty steadied me more than the tea could have. The walls of her small apartment hummed with ordinary life, an old clock ticking, a neighbor's television murmuring through the plaster. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that kind of peace. "I was such a fool," I whispered. "No," she said, squeezing my fingers. "You were a wife who trusted her husband. That's not foolishness, that's love misused." Outside, the rain had begun again, soft against the windows. We sat there until the storm dulled. Two sisters in a small kitchen, mapping out justice on the back of a grocery receipt. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Safety, shaped like her voice. By the time I went to bed on her couch, the plan was clear, written in both our minds. Morning would bring confrontation, but I wouldn't walk into it alone. Morning arrived gray and thin, the kind of light that makes the world look half-finished. May handed me coffee in a travel mug, her expression all business. "We start with the bank," she said, already zipping up her coat. The branch opened at 9. We were there at 8:55, waiting on the steps. Inside, everything smelled of paper and static. A clerk led us to a small office with glass walls and a placard that read, "Fraud Investigations, Ms. Albright." The woman who met us was calm, practiced, her smile professional but kind. "Tell me everything," she said. I laid out the story. The loan, the forged signature, the recording. She took notes, her pen moving steadily across a form that seemed endless. Then she asked for ID, compared it to the loan file, and called up a digital copy of the documents on her screen. "There's no doubt," she murmured, tilting the monitor so I could see. "The signature on this form is inconsistent with your handwriting. It wasn't my flourish, not my careful loop. A stranger's version of me." Miss Albright's tone softened. "We'll escalate this immediately. You'll need to provide samples of your writing for analysis. Once confirmed, the loan will be frozen and referred to law enforcement." May nodded beside me, protective as a guard dog. "And after that?" "After that," the woman said, "the police take over." 2 hours later, we sat across from a detective at the precinct, Sergeant Nolan, square-shouldered, steady eyes, the kind of man who'd seen too much but still listened. He played the recording, every word of Aaron's voice filling the small office. When it ended, the silence was sharp. "This is enough to open a case," he said, signing his name on the report. "You'll be contacted for testimony. If the handwriting analysis confirms forgery, it becomes criminal fraud. A case in my name, but this time, not as the victim of deceit, but as the claimant of truth." For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. The silence that had buried me was finally being filed into evidence. The call came just after sunset. While May was in the kitchen washing dishes and I was sitting by her window, watching the street lamps blink on one by one, my phone buzzed against the windowsill. The name on the screen was still familiar, though it no longer felt like it belonged to anyone I knew. Aaron. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me swipe accept. "Clara." His voice cracked through the receiver, raw and wet with panic. "Please don't hang up. Just listen." I said nothing. The silence made him stumble. "I know you went to the bank. They froze the account. The police, they called me in today. Clara, I messed up. I can fix this, I swear. I'll pay everything back. Every cent. Just don't let them press charges." His words tumbled out in gasps, the sound of someone drowning in his own excuses. I could hear traffic behind him, the hollow echo of a parking garage. You forged my name, I said softly. You used my credit, my trust. I know. I wasn't thinking straight. I had debts, Clara. I thought I'd handle it before you found out. I never meant for it to go this far. You didn't mean for you to get caught, I corrected. He exhaled, a long broken sound. Can we meet? Please, face to face. I just need to explain. There's nothing left to explain. Clara, please. I already gave your explanation to the detective, I said. He listened carefully. For a heartbeat, there was only his breathing, ragged and small. Don't do this to me, he whispered finally. I ended the call. The phone screen went black, its reflection catching my own face, calm, steady, unrecognizable. Regret that arrives only after discovery isn't remorse. It's fear dressed as love, and I had no room left for either. The cafe was nearly empty, the kind of place where time seemed to move slower just out of respect for heartbreak. The windows fogged from the rain outside, softening the view of umbrellas and hurried strangers. I chose a corner table, ordered tea I didn't want, and waited. Aaron arrived late. He looked smaller somehow, his confidence stripped down to a nervous shuffle. His coat was creased, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. He sat opposite me without a word, the air between us thick with what could no longer be mended. Thank you for meeting, he started, voice brittle. I need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I got lost, Clara. I made mistakes. I stirred my tea slowly, watching the spoon spin, the small whirlpool fading. You didn't make a mistake, I said evenly. You made a choice, he swallowed. Can you forgive me? The rain outside grew harder, rattling against the window like polite applause. Forgiveness isn't what this is about, I said. It's about closure. I slid an envelope across the table. Divorce papers, neatly prepared, unsigned by him. All you have to do is sign. He stared at the papers, then at me. You really want this? I do. Completely. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen, the same hand that had once held mine steady during storms and funerals. The scratch of ink on paper was the only sound between us. When he finished, I took the envelope, folded it back into my bag, and stood. Clara, take care of yourself, I said, not cruelly, just finally. The bell above the door chimed when I left. Rain struck my coat in soft applause. Outside, the air smelled new, clean, unburdened. Inside, a man sat alone with an empty cup, and a marriage signed away by steady hands. The call came on a quiet Thursday morning, just as I was folding laundry by May's living room window. The phone vibrated against the table, and Detective Nolan's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated before answering, as though saying hello would reopen a wound that had only just stopped bleeding. Mrs. Wynne. His voice was steady, professional but not unkind. I wanted to update you personally. The handwriting analysis came back conclusive. Your signature was forged. Mr. Wynne has confessed. He's accepted a plea agreement, 2 years of probation, restitution of $10,000, and a permanent note on his record. I stared at the folded sweater in my hands, its clean cotton creases suddenly blurring. So it's over, I said softly. It's over, he confirmed. You'll receive the restitution in 3 installments. You don't need to appear in court. He signed everything. I thanked him and hung up. For a long moment, I just stood there, the quiet stretching between seconds. No surge of victory, no satisfaction, just stillness. The kind that settles after a long, brutal storm, when the last raindrop falls and you realize the roof held. May appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel. That was him? I nodded. It's done. She walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Then breathe, Clara. It's time. I did. A long, shaky inhale that felt like my first real one in months. Outside, the world carried on. Buses rumbling, children shouting down the street, the ordinary noise of life untouched by our small wars. Justice hadn't roared or punished or paraded, It had simply written the ending, quiet and precise. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for the next blow. The new apartment smelled faintly of paint and morning air, raw, clean, almost innocent. 2 rooms, 1 window that faced east, and a narrow balcony where the rail was still cold from last night's rain. I carried in the last box myself, setting it beside the wall and standing for a moment in the silence. No echo of arguments, no footsteps pacing the hall, no ghost of his voice calling my name. May helped me hang the curtains, pale linen that shifted gently with every draft. "You'll like the light here," she said. And I did. The sun came in softly, not demanding attention, just existing, like peace learning how to live indoors. We made tea in mismatched mugs, sitting cross-legged on the floor. The cardboard boxes became our table. I had bought a small pot of lavender from a vendor outside the subway station, its scent faint but certain. When May left later that afternoon, I stood by the window holding the plant, watching as the street below filled with the sound of ordinary lives. People laughed, argued, hurried somewhere. Nobody looked up. That anonymity felt like freedom. When evening came, I unpacked slowly, books first, then clothes. Each folded item carried a faint scent of someone I used to be. I put my phone on the sill, its screen dark. No more waiting for it to light up with apologies or threats. Before bed, I opened the window wide. The city's breath drifted in, distant music, a dog barking, the low hum of traffic. I climbed under the blanket and stared at the ceiling, waiting for the familiar restlessness to return. It didn't. The quiet was startling at first, like meeting a stranger who looks too much like yourself. Then, slowly, it began to feel right. This life without shadows. This peace that didn't have to be earned through fear. For the first time in years, I slept all the way to morning. It started as a small promise to myself, to learn something new, something that belonged only to me. So, on a chilly Tuesday evening, I found myself in a classroom that smelled faintly of chalk dust and coffee, sitting among strangers with open notebooks and hesitant smiles. The sign outside read, "Italian for Beginners." The instructor, an energetic woman named Lucia, moved through the room with a warmth that made even the shyest of us repeat words aloud. "Buonasera. Come stai?" The syllables felt foreign but pleasant on my tongue, like stretching a muscle long unused. Around me, laughter filled the small space each time someone stumbled over a pronunciation. For the first time in months, I caught myself smiling without forcing it. He sat 2 seats away, a tall man with silver at his temples and a calm that felt unstudied. Julian. He had a notebook full of neat handwriting and an accent that softened when he spoke Italian. During the break, we found ourselves by the vending machine, both debating whether the coffee inside was drinkable. "I'm learning for travel," he said, offering a small, almost shy smile. "You?" "For myself," I answered, "to remember I can still begin things." That earned a quiet nod, one that seemed to say he understood more than he spoke. Over the next weeks, we shared pages of conversation about books, languages, the odd ways grief reshapes us. Julian never asked about my past. He listened when I volunteered small pieces, never digging deeper than I offered. His patience was disarming, a kind of safety I'd forgotten existed. One evening, as we left class under a sky thick with snow, he opened his umbrella and simply said, "Let me walk you to the bus stop." Under its small circle of shelter, words flowed easier, softer. I realized then that trust doesn't rebuild through grand gestures. It grows, quietly, in the pauses between them. Morning light found every corner of the apartment, spilling across the wooden floor and touching the pale curtains with gold. The lavender on the windowsill had bloomed again, tiny purple flowers nodding in the gentle breeze. I stood barefoot by the glass, coffee warm in my hands, watching the world wake up. Delivery trucks rumbled somewhere below. A dog barked. A bicycle bell chimed in the distance. Ordinary sounds. Beautiful, because they ask nothing of me. On the table sat my notebook, open to a blank page. I picked up a pen and wrote, slowly, deliberately, "Never silence the truth again." The words looked steady, sure. I underlined them once, not as a warning this time, but as a promise. It had been 6 months since the last call from the detective. The restitution payments were complete, the divorce finalized, the account closed, both literal and otherwise. I hadn't heard from Aaron since. I didn't need to. His absence had become its own kind of apology. The kettle hissed behind me, and I poured another cup of coffee, letting the steam fog the window for a heartbeat before it cleared. The reflection that looked back was mine again, lines softer, eyes quieter, but not smaller. There was space in them now, room for new things to live. Julian had texted the night before, suggesting a Saturday trip to the coast to practice our Italian over sea air and espresso. I hadn't answered yet, not out of hesitation, but because it felt good to take my time. Freedom, I was learning, wasn't loud or reckless. It was calm. I set the pen down, drew the curtain aside, and let the morning fill the room. Peace, I realized, is not the absence of betrayal. It's what remains after you've walked through it. The quiet that stays and finally feels like home.